Imagine this. It's a seemingly ordinary day. You're taking a quiet, almost meditative walk out in the wide-open New Mexico desert. The sun's starting to dip, painting the sky. Those amazing orange and purple colors. The air's dry, warm, smells like dust and sagebrush.
At high desert air, yeah.
Exactly. And your dog, this time it's a black lab mix named Ruka. He's off-leash, doing his dog thing, sniffing around. He stops, starts pawing at the dirt in this dry creek bed, and then he digs something up.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just another animal bone, which apparently is pretty common out there.
Oh, yeah, you find stuff like that all the time.
But this is different. Something feels really chillingly wrong about it. This was February 2nd, 2009, out on the edge of Albuquerque's West Mesa. And for the woman walking Ruka, Christine Ross, what he found was just, unthinkable.
It's really striking, that initial feeling Christine had. She first thought, maybe just an animal bone, like you said, super common out there. But she described this gut feeling, a sense that the shape of it was just off. It didn't look like the usual coyote or rabbit bone she was used to seeing. That immediate, almost visceral reaction, that intuition turned out to be absolutely crucial.
And thank goodness for it, really. Because she took a quick picture with her phone, sent it to her sister, who happens to be a registered nurse, kind of hoping she'd say, oh, it's nothing.
Right, looking for reassurance.
But the reply came back fast, and it was definitive. The bone looked like a human femur.
Wow.
So an immediate, urgent call to 911, the Albuquerque Police Department. And what started with just one single bone, it escalated incredibly quickly. Investigators get there, start carefully looking around, and they don't just find the rest of that skeleton.
No.
They find a second body. Tragically, sort of intertwined with the first one. The scene was already horrific, like a nightmare unfolding right there in the desert. And as they'd soon find out, it was only the very grim beginning.
It was like this immediate confirmation, wasn't it? This wasn't just one tragic, isolated thing. It was something much more disturbing. A pattern emerging right away. The scale, the horror of what they were about to uncover, it just started to unravel this huge, profound mystery.
And that really is our mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to try and unpack the staggering, honestly deeply unsettling details of what turned into one of New Mexico's most heinous and enduring unsolved cases.
Yeah.
We'll peel back the layers of mystery, share the absolutely heartbreaking stories of the victims, and confront these chilling questions that even now, 15 years later, still hang heavy in the desert air, tragically unanswered. This is the story of the West Mesa bone collector. So to really get a handle on the horror that unfolded, we need to picture the West Mesa itself. It's on the sprawling outskirts of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Think rugged, high desert landscape.
Yeah, lots of thorny shrubs, dry washes, what they call arroyos.
Right, stretching out under this huge, vast blue sky. You can almost feel that intense, dry heat, taste the dust, hear the wind whistling through the scrub. It feels remote.
And putting this in context, that area has deep historical meaning. For centuries, it was actually a sacred site for Native American communities. It was wild, untamed, coyotes, eagles soaring overhead.
Wow, I didn't realize that specific history.
Yeah, but by the early 2000s, urban sprawl starts creeping in. Developers had these big plans leveling huge sections of this ancient desert for new housing tracts. They envisioned suburbs out there.
Okay, and then 2008 happened.
Exactly. The global financial crisis hit hard, and it brought all those ambitious housing projects to a sudden, grinding halt.
So what was left?
Just this eerie, unfinished landscape, random patches of grated sand and dirt, weirdly next to maybe partially built roads or isolated fire hydrants, even some streets lined with young trees that just led nowhere.
That sounds incredibly desolate.
It created this forgotten sort of place, almost perfect for concealment. And it was right along a dry creek bed, cutting through one of these abandoned developments, specifically off Dennis Chavez Boulevard and 118th Street, that Christine and Ruka were walking that evening. It was a place basically designed by circumstance to be ignored, overlooked.
It's like the economic collapse accidentally created the perfect, secluded stage for this incredibly grim discovery. An abandoned suburban dream turned into a burial ground.
A cruel twist of fate, absolutely.
And what a discovery it turned out to be. From those first two bodies, the crime scene just exploded. Almost immediately, within days, they found a third body, then a fourth.
Just kept finding more.
Yeah. Over the next 3 months, officials launched this massive, painstaking operation, working tirelessly, day and night sometimes, meticulously combing through a staggering 92 acres of land.
92 acres, that's enormous.
It's huge. We're talking heavy construction equipment, like backhoes, clearing large areas, but then shifting down to tiny hand sieves, painstakingly sifting every single scoop of dirt. They dug down as deep as 18 feet, that's about 5.5 meters, into the ground,
Wow.
ultimately moving over 40,000 cubic yards of dirt. It was just an excavation on an almost unprecedented scale for something like this.
And one of the most, I guess, compelling aspects of that whole excavation, beyond just the sheer amount of earth they moved, was the final horrifying count. The remains of 11 women and one unborn child.
11 women and an unborn baby.
Critically, only bones were recovered, which immediately told investigators these remains had been there for, quote, years at least.
Yeah.
That condition instantly signaled this wasn't something recent. This was systematic, a long-term operation. It suggested a perpetrator who wasn't just prolific, but methodically consistent in how they disposed of the bodies, returning to the same hidden spot over a long period. That completely shifted the investigation from maybe a single homicide to this complex, sprawling cold case with a really broad and chilling timeline.
And the media, well, you can imagine, they quickly caught on to the unfolding horror. Within days, they coined the name, the West Mesa Bone Collector. It instantly became, for Albuquerque, the crime of the century. So after this just unimaginable discovery, the next step was agonizingly complex identification.
Yeah, that must have been brutal.
It took a heart-wrenching 2 years for the medical examiners to definitively identify those decomposed remains. They had to rely heavily on DNA, dental records. Can you even imagine the unbearable weight for those families, holding on to some tiny sliver of hope, only to have it extinguished like that?
It's unimaginable pain.
15 years on, we know the names of those 11 women and the unborn child. Each one a life tragically cut short. But the killer's name. Still a chilling, elusive mystery. A ghost out there in the desert wind.
And it's so crucial, like you said, that we humanize these women. They weren't just numbers, not just statistics in a grim tally. They were real people. Complex lives, families, dreams, and often, profound struggles. Understanding who they were helps us grasp the full scope of this tragedy and maybe the systemic failures that made them vulnerable in the first place.
You're absolutely right. It's paramount we reclaim their humanity, understand who they were beyond the headlines, to really get the impact their disappearances had, not just on them, but on generations of their loved ones. So let's take a moment, acknowledge each of them. Starting with Jamie Katerina Bill. She was the youngest victim, just 15 years old, a child, really.
15.
Last seen March 2004 at a family gathering near the Albuquerque airport, and she was with her cousin, Evelyn. It's just hard to fathom a life that young ending so brutally.
And Jamie's cousin, Evelyn Salazar, she was 23, found tragically alongside Jamie in that grave. Evelyn was a mother. She had 2 young daughters, Mariah and Angel. And despite, yes, a history of drug use and sex work, her family said she'd actually been making positive changes, really trying to build a better future for herself and her kids before she and Jamie vanished together from that same family gathering.
God, the thought of them cousins found together like that, almost entwined. It's just incredibly heartbreaking. It speaks to the immediate horror of their shared fate.
It really does.
Next, Selania Edwards. Only 16 years old when she passed. Her life, from what we know, was just filled with unimaginable tragedy from a very young age.
Yeah, her story is particularly rough.
Originally from Lawton, Oklahoma, she'd been living in a group home since she was 5 because her mother was incarcerated for murder. And her father and brother were also in and out of jail frequently. She basically never knew stability or safety.
It's just constant disruption.
She ran away from the group home around 2003. There were rumors she went to Texas, then ended up in Aurora, Colorado, where she was seen with sex workers. She was even arrested for solicitation in July 2004. On the streets, people knew her as Mimi or Chocolate. And she stands out, too, because she was the only black victim among the 11 and the only one from out of state. Which makes you wonder how that might have affected her vulnerability or even the investigation later on.
Her story just powerfully underscores that extreme vulnerability, doesn't it? So young, disconnected from any stable home, far from Oklahoma, caught in that incredibly dangerous world of sex work. That context is just vital as we look at the broader patterns here.
Absolutely. Then there's Gina Michelle Valdez. She was 22 and 4 months pregnant when she disappeared.
Pregnant. Oh, man.
A mother already to Angelica and Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Last seen September 2004, but it took 5 excruciating months for her father to officially report her missing. She, too, was known to be involved in sex work. That added layer of her pregnancy is another profound level of tragedy in this case.
And Monica Candelaria, also 22, mother of a young son. Last seen May 2003. Her family, they tried desperately to find her. They vehemently pushed back against any suggestion she was just a runaway.
They knew better?
They knew better. They were acutely aware of her struggles, what they called her high-risk lifestyle. She had a conviction for solicitation, known connections to local gangs, a history of substance abuse. This case really highlights the immediate dismissal so many families faced from authorities, just labeling their loved ones as having run off.
Awful. Then we have Virginia Cloven, 24, lifelong Albuquerque resident. Her family described her as positive, intelligent, warm. But her life took this devastating turn after a brother was murdered.
Another traumatic event preceding the vulnerability.
Exactly. She struggled immensely with that loss, ran away as a teen, and by 17 was deep into drug addiction, often turning to sex work to support her habit. She'd become estranged from her family because of her lifestyle, but in April 2004, she called her father, told him she was getting married to a guy just released from prison.
Wow, okay.
That chilling phone call was the last time anyone heard from Virginia. It took 6 months for her to be reported missing.
It's just striking, isn't it? How many of these women had lives marked by significant personal challenges, often stemming from trauma or systemic issues, which just intensified their vulnerability to predators.
Yeah, it's a pattern. Julie Sidney Nieto was 24, a troubled young mother. She had one son, Dominic, often left him with her own mother. Her last family contact was July 2004, visiting her grandfather. Then she just vanished. And there's a secondary tragedy here, too, just heartbreaking. Her sister, Valerie, became severely depressed after Julie disappeared. 2 years later, Valerie tragically passed away from an overdose, just consumed by grief and the loss of her sister.
Oh, that's horrific. It really shows the ripple effect, doesn't it? It doesn't just impact the victim. It devastates entire families for years. Then there's Victoria Ann Chavez, 26, last seen June 2003. Similar story, her disappearance wasn't reported right away. It took a full year for her mother to report her missing.
Whole year.
A whole year. By 26, she'd been convicted of solicitation 5 times, known drug user. Victoria was actually the very first victim identified from the mass grave, which gave police a crucial starting point, an initial face to the tragedy.
Veronica Romero, 27, mother of 5 young children, Divinity, Jane, Nicholas, Journey, Savannah, and Joshua.
Wow, 5 kids.
Reported missing on Valentine's Day 2004 after she hadn't been seen for 2 weeks. Witnesses saw her getting into a white pickup truck downtown. Her family, her friends, they tried desperately to find her. Organized searches, put up missing person posters all over the city.
So the family was active.
Very active. But her family later said law enforcement did very little to actually investigate her disappearance, a pattern we're unfortunately going to see repeated.
That lack of immediate, thorough police response to these initial missing person reports, it's a deeply disturbing pattern, and one that unfortunately characterizes so many cases involving vulnerable populations.
Doreen Marquez, 24. Loving, devoted mother of 2, Destiny and Mercedes. Described as cheerful, deeply committed to her family, her faith. She'd struggled with depression, but her kids were her anchor, kept her grounded. But things took a bad turn after her partner went to prison. Her mental health declined significantly. She tragically turned to drugs, started disappearing for days, then weeks, then months.
So there was a history of disappearances.
Exactly. She was last seen October 10th, 2003, dropping her kids off at their Christian school. It took a full year for her family to report her missing, because they initially just assumed she'd taken off again like before and would eventually come back. But she never did.
That delayed reporting, while totally understandable given her history, definitely added layers of complexity to the initial search efforts.
Crucial time just slipped away. And finally, Cinnamon Elks, the oldest victim at 32, last seen August 2004. Her mother remembered her as a perfect child who tragically fell in with the wrong crowd. Cinnamon had 2 kids, but because of her involvement in sex work and drug habits, she made the incredibly difficult decision to give custody to her own mother, Diana. She had a long record. 19 arrests for solicitation, 12 for drug possession.
So she was well known to law enforcement in that context.
Very. And what's more, she was known to associate with at least 2 of the other victims later found at West Mesa, suggesting maybe connections within this vulnerable community itself.
Right, potential links there.
Her mother, Diana, reported her missing after Cinnamon missed her birthday. Call something her daughter would absolutely never, ever miss. Again, officers initially dismissed Diana's concerns, told her Cinnamon probably just disappeared again, wasn't really missing, refused to file an official report until 4 months had passed.
4 months. It becomes profoundly clear when you look at all these individual lives together that a deeply disturbing pattern emerges. All female, ages ranging from that heartbreaking 15 up to 32. All but one, Selania Edwards, were Hispanic and native New Mexicans. And strikingly, the vast majority were mothers, often struggling to keep ties with their kids amidst really difficult circumstances.
And the disappearances themselves, they weren't random, were they? They all happened within this relatively tight 4-year window.
Yeah.
Between 2001 and 2005.
Exactly.
And what's truly incredible, almost providing a chilling visual timeline, is when investigators reviewed historical satellite images of the burial site area.
Oh yeah, this part is fascinating.
Multiple images, taken between 2003 and 2005, actually showed clear tire tracks leading right to the burial area. And you could see small patches of disturbed earth visibly increasing in number with each new image.
Wow.
This wasn't just random dumping. This suggested a very specific repeated pattern, a consistent timeline for these secret burials over several years.
The precision you can see in those satellite images, showing specific, recurring, disturbed patches of earth. It strongly suggests whoever did this was methodically burying these women over time, consistently returning to that same isolated spot. And a truly critical, though tragic, link, one that unfortunately cast a long shadow over the investigation, was that all but one of these women had known involvement in sex work, and many were current or former drug addicts.
Right.
This commonality profoundly influenced and in many ways really hampered the official response to their disappearances and later their murders.
Or that pattern, and especially that common thread linking them to sex work and drug use. It unfortunately became a huge factor in the official response, or maybe more accurately, the stunning lack of response from law enforcement. Which brings us right to the troubled investigation itself. And it was just riddled with challenges, controversies right from the get-go.
Yeah.
One of the biggest, most immediate problems, the sheer lack of traditional forensic evidence.
Absolutely critical problem.
We're talking 11 bodies, but after years out in that brutal desert environment, the bones were just too decomposed to determine an exact cause of death.
That's a critical and just devastating point for any investigation like this. When remains are left in the harsh desert for years, the extreme heat, the dryness, the intense sun, plus scavengers, it causes rapid and complete decomposition of all the soft tissues.
Right, everything just disappears.
All the vital organs, muscles, skin, the things that would normally show clear signs of trauma, strangulation marks, evidence of suffocation, they're completely gone. You're left with just skeletal remains. And that makes it incredibly challenging, almost impossible, to pinpoint a precise cause of death beyond a very general finding like homicidal violence.
So that was the official cause for all of them.
That was the official cause of death recorded for all 11 victims, homicidal violence. Medical examiners theorized it was likely methods like strangulation or suffocation, which tragically leave minimal, if any, evidence on bone.
And they were found wrapped in plastic. Did that help or hurt?
It actually accelerated the decomposition by trapping moisture and heat, like a greenhouse effect. And it also destroyed any potential trace evidence, hair, fibers, bodily fluids, that might have linked the victims to a perpetrator or a specific location. So without that kind of crucial forensic evidence, an investigation usually pivots hard towards witnesses.
Right.
But in this case, nobody came forward with any meaningful information that could really break the case open.
So you have this horrific discovery, 11 bodies, an unborn fetus, same isolated spot. It is, for Albuquerque, the crime of the century. And yet, unbelievably, officials initially refused to publicly say a serial killer was responsible.
It's almost baffling, isn't it, given the obvious pattern?
Why? Why would they be so reluctant?
Well, the chief of police at the time actually said, and this is a direct quote, "The remains are all old. Had we been finding fresh bodies, I'd be much more concerned. Everybody can be reassured that there's not an active serial killer in Albuquerque actively killing and preying on people."
Wait, what? Not actively killing? That sounds like minimizing it.
That public statement, astonishingly, it downplayed the urgency. It implied the killer might have just stopped or moved on, or maybe it was disposing of bodies differently now. This framing profoundly impacted public perception and arguably the resources put into the case.
It's such a contradiction, though, because the chief also promised the grieving families a top priority investigation, right? He assembled a task force of 40 investigators, even called in the FBI.
He did. He made those promises.
Yet almost in the same breath, he repeatedly brings up the victims high-risk lifestyles,
Mm.
as if that somehow lessened the crime or implied they brought it on themselves. How did that kind of talk land with the public and, more importantly, with the families desperate for justice?
Oh, it's absolutely devastating. That kind of framing isn't just dismissive. It subtly, almost invisibly, shifts blame onto the victims in the public consciousness. And it fundamentally undermines the perceived urgency and importance of the investigation. For the families, already going through unimaginable grief and uncertainty, it adds this unbearable layer of pain. It suggests their loved ones weren't worthy of the same investigative effort. And it deeply erodes their trust in the system that's supposed to protect them and find answers.
Yeah, that trust is crucial.
Despite that really challenging backdrop, about 5 months after the bodies were found, the family's hopes were briefly lifted when police announced they were making significant progress and that the suspect pool had been narrowed down to 5 individuals, though they didn't release any names.
Okay, a glimmer of hope. But here's where the story takes an even more chilling turn, potentially revealing some deep systemic failures. 4 long years before those bones were even found, a dedicated detective named Ida Lopez had been tracking a really concerning, unexplained spike in missing sex workers in Albuquerque.
Yes, this is a crucial part of the story.
This wasn't something they realized after the grave was found. She'd been ringing the alarm bell about these disappearances since way back in 2005.
What's truly striking here is that Lopez noticed a very specific, alarming pattern. Many of the missing women were Latina, and nearly all had known connections to drugs. She put together this meticulously detailed list of these missing women. Recognizing the grave implications, she repeatedly tried to convince her superiors to form a dedicated task force to find them. Agonizingly, she was turned down, over and over again, even by the APD's own sex crimes division, the very unit whose job it should have been to address this kind of violence.
That's unbelievable.
It tragically illustrates a concept criminologists call less dead victims. These are individuals, often from marginalized groups, targeted by predators because the killers believe, often correctly, that the police response will be slow, or maybe even non-existent. And heartbreakingly, that proved true here. Many of the victims' families reported that when they first tried to file missing person reports, police just labeled their loved ones as runaways and put minimal effort into searching.
And the most gut-wrenching part of this, the truly devastating punchline.
Ultimately, 10 of the names on Detective Ida Lopez's meticulously compiled, desperately presented list were tragically found in that mass grave.
10 out of 11. Her warnings, her hard work, her pleas, ignored for years. But there might be an even darker, maybe more insidious reason for that stunning lack of serious investigation. Something beyond just neglect or victim blaming.
This brings up a really crucial point. Could that consistent failure to investigate these disappearances have been maybe a deliberate avoidance, specifically to prevent exposing deeper, more disturbing corruption within the Albuquerque Police Department itself?
What makes you say that?
Consider this chilling detail. Cinnamon Elks, one of the victims, reportedly made a profoundly disturbing statement shortly before she disappeared in August 2004. She told a friend that a dirty cop was chopping off the heads of prostitutes and burying them in the West Mesa.
Whoa, hold on. A dirty cop chopping off heads and burying them in the West Mesa.
Yeah. Now, while no official report of decapitation has ever been made public in connection with the remains found, the terrifying specificity of her naming the West Mesa location, it's incredibly unsettling, given that's exactly where she was later found.
That is truly deeply unsettling. A dirty cop, that's an explosive accusation, and it carries enormous weight. And when you put this in a broader context, the APD, the Albuquerque Police Department, has faced serious, well-documented scrutiny for its conduct over the years.
That's right. In 2014, the Department of Justice actually started monitoring the APD after a major civil investigation found a pervasive pattern of excessive force, including deadly force. Between 2009 and 2012 alone, there were 20 civilian fatalities linked to APD officers, many later ruled unconstitutional.
20 fatalities in just a few years.
And specific incidents painted an even bleaker, more disturbing picture of a department seemingly operating with impunity. There were highly publicized cases, a mentally ill man shot on tape, multiple lawsuits from sex workers accusing officers of sexual assault inside their patrol cars.
Inside police cars.
Yes. A detective charged with kidnapping and sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl. A sergeant charged with sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl. And out of dozens of these serious allegations against officers, a shocking statistic emerged. Only 2 convictions against officers ever actually happened.
Only 2 convictions out of dozens of allegations.
That's the record.
So when you look at this pattern alleged abuse, unchecked power, systemic corruption within the department, it starts to make a disturbing kind of sense why the police might have seemed so lackadaisical, so unconcerned about investigating these particular disappearances and murders. It really forces us to confront a terrifying question. Could the West Mesa bone collector have actually been a police officer? Someone who knew exactly how neglected these vulnerable women were and felt confident that no real effort would be made to find them.
It's a question that hangs heavy over the case, absolutely.
So who could possibly be responsible for such a heinous, sustained crime? The investigation, despite all its issues, did eventually zero in on some individuals who became prime suspects. Let's first look at Joseph Blee,
Okay.
an Albuquerque local with a truly disturbing history, extensive record of violent sex crimes, and nearly 140 documented police encounters related to sex work and drugs just between 1990 and 2009.
What stands out there isn't just the sheer number of interactions with police, but how chillingly his activities seem to align with the profile of the victims. And in a stunning twist, just a week after the West Mesa bodies were found, his own wife called the police, urging them to investigate him.
Wait, his wife called them. Wow, that says a lot.
It really does. Detectives then started watching him and reportedly saw him actively stalking sex workers near the same area where the burials happened. His home was searched, and sex workers who'd encountered him told terrifying stories, tying them up, threatening them, assaulting them.
And the search of his home turned up something too, didn't it? Jewelry.
Exactly. His wife and daughter reported finding women's jewelry and underwear hidden in their shed, which was incredibly significant because many of the West Mesa victims' families had specifically reported that their loved ones' jewelry was missing when they vanished.
Okay, so that sounds like a strong circumstantial link.
It does. And the timeline around his arrest is also pretty telling, maybe highlighting systemic delays. While he had been accused of several sexual assaults before the West Mesa discovery, it was only after the bone collector investigation blew up that he was finally arrested, prosecuted, and convicted for those older crimes.
Older crimes?
Yeah, assaults on middle schoolers back in the 1980s. In one really egregious case, a DNA kit collected from a victim in the 80s wasn't even tested until 2010, well after the West Mesa bodies were found, finally linking him to that assault from over 20 years prior. For those horrific acts, he got sentenced to 90 years in prison.
90 years. Okay, so there's absolutely no doubt Joseph Blee is a monster, a truly dangerous predator. But what was the definitive smoking gun link connecting him directly to the West Mesa murders?
That's the issue. The only direct piece of physical evidence investigators found was a small tree tag located near the graves. They meticulously traced that tag back to a nursery that Joseph Blee was known to frequent for his landscaping work.
A tree tag. That's it.
That was the only direct physical link. So while he's clearly a violent sexual predator whose history overlaps disturbingly with the victim profile, the investigation ultimately couldn't definitively, forensically link him to the West Mesa murders themselves, which meant investigators had to keep looking.
Okay, so if Blee, despite his awful history, isn't the slam dunk, let's shift to Lorenzo Montoya. He also had a long, violent history against sex workers in Albuquerque, and the evidence against him seems, well, arguably a lot more compelling.
Montoya's record is deeply disturbing. An arrest in 1999 for sexually assaulting and strangling a prostitute. Then another strikingly similar arrest 5 years later, in 2004.
Strangling. That fits the suspected cause of death.
Exactly. He was also accused of repeated domestic violence. His girlfriend told officers he'd threatened to kill her and, quote, bury her in lime.
Bury her in lime. That's incredibly specific and chilling, given the disposal method here. Speaks to a calculated kind of brutality.
It truly does. What's more, his mobile home was located just 3 miles from the burial site itself.
3 miles, that's unnervingly close.
Very close. His coworkers also reportedly overheard him talking about killing women and burying them out in the West Mesa. But here's the truly crucial, maybe the aha moment in this whole thing. By the time the bodies were found in 2009, Lorenzo Montoya was already dead.
He was already dead.
In December 2006, he lost his life after strangling a sex worker named Sharika Hill. Her pimp came looking for her and apparently found Montoya in the act of dragging her body towards his truck. She was bound with cord and duct tape around her ankles, knees, and wrists.
Oh my.
The pimp then shot and killed Montoya. And remarkably, the pimp never faced any charges for that killing.
That is A truly astonishing turn of events. So the main theory among investigators is that the West Mesa burials just stopped right after Montoya died.
That is what investigators widely believe, yes. And it's a fundamental piece of their theory. The timing is incredibly powerful. And when police searched Lorenzo's belongings after he passed, they found some profoundly disturbing footage and images on his camera. Only a small, heavily redacted section has ever been released publicly, but the initial part of the video reportedly shows him having relations with an unidentified woman who appears possibly deceased.
Oh, God.
The screen then goes blank, but you can distinctly hear in the background audio the clear, unmistakable sound of tape being pulled from a roll.
Like packing tape.
Exactly. It's widely theorized this was Montoya preparing to bind or wrap a body for disposal. This, combined with the chilling fact that the consistent pattern of West Mesa burials abruptly stopped after his death in 2006, it makes him the strongest candidate in many investigators' eyes for the title of the West Mesa Bone Collector.
It certainly paints a very clear and deeply disturbing picture of a primary suspect. But like with a lot of these complex, sprawling cases, there are other leads, right? Other people police looked at, some who turned out to be red herrings.
That's right. For instance, there was Ron Irwin, a photographer from Missouri. He got linked because the APD publicly released photos of 7 women, some appearing unconscious or unresponsive, asking the public for help identifying them.
I remember seeing those photos released.
Yeah, Irwin was known to hang around the New Mexico State Fair, which is relatively close to the burial site. His home and studio were raided. Hundreds of photos confiscated. Initial rumors went wild, suggesting these were the unidentified victims. But it turned out 2 of the women in the photos were still alive. A third had passed away years earlier from natural causes, completely unrelated. Ron Irwin was eventually cleared of any involvement in the West Mesa murders, but the intense public scrutiny, the raid, it effectively destroyed his reputation and his career.
Ugh, that's a stark reminder of the collateral damage these big investigations can cause. Just awful for him. Who else?
There was also Lou Fred Reynolds, an Albuquerque pimp. Pictures of several of the West Mesa victims were found at his home.
Okay, that sounds significant.
It does, but despite that connection, there was 0 physical evidence linking him to the murders themselves. He also passed away from natural causes in January 2009, just a month before the first bone was found. So he was never really considered a strong suspect.
Right, timing doesn't fit for him being the sole perpetrator over the years.
Exactly. And briefly, Scott Lee Kimball, a convicted serial killer from Colorado, notorious for several horrific murders. He even claimed at one point he was being investigated for West Mesa, but he strongly denied any involvement. Investigators found no credible evidence linking him either.
So given all this complex, mostly circumstantial evidence, the most compelling theory still points overwhelmingly to a single killer, doesn't it?
Indeed. The idea of multiple serial killers operating at the same time, independently, but all choosing to consistently bury bodies in the exact same remote spot, it's considered far less likely. The striking similarities in how the victims' bodies were prepared, wrapped in plastic, and consistently dumped in that specific area over that sustained period, it strongly suggests the work of one person. Or, I suppose, at the very least, a highly coordinated group, but that seems far less plausible given there's no other evidence to support it. The consistency really points to one hand.
So, 15 years later, where does this profoundly unsettling case stand officially?
The investigation is still active. It's officially known as the 118th Street investigation. It's currently overseen by a retired homicide sergeant, Liz Thompson.
Okay, so someone is still actively working it.
Yes. The police department confirmed they've received and looked into more than 1,200 tips over the years, which shows the community is still engaged. But the number of suspects still on their official list, that remains undisclosed to the public.
Interesting. And have they released a profile of the killer?
No, and that's interesting too. No official, detailed profile of the murderer has ever been released publicly. This might be a deliberate strategy, maybe to prevent the killer, if they are somehow terrifyingly still active, from changing their pattern or methods.
That makes sense. Has the current investigator, Liz Thompson, offered any insights?
She has, yeah. She's theorized that this person may have been, quote, charming or friendly initially, someone who could build trust or establish some kind of relationship to exploit these women's vulnerabilities.
That tracks for a predator targeting vulnerable people over years. It's not just random violence. There's a method.
Precisely. Thompson also emphasized that the burying of the bodies is a key characteristic. The person responsible clearly had the means and the know-how, not just to navigate that remote area, especially back then, often likely in darkness, but also the physical strength and methodical nature to dig deep, consistent graves.
And they're careful.
Incredibly careful. Showed an ability to meticulously dispose of the bodies without leaving those crucial clues: no clothing, no personal items, no definitive forensic evidence like bullets or clear trauma signs. She also believes the killer's pattern might have evolved, suggesting maybe someone who started as a, quote, disorganized sociopath with a growing bloodlust, but gradually became more careful, more systematic, harder to trace.
That's a truly chilling thought. A killer getting better at it, more sophisticated with each crime.
It is. A killer honing their craft, becoming more elusive over time.
And there have been more searches since the initial discovery, haven't there? Even years later.
Yes, in 2018, they used ground-penetrating radar to examine a wider area of the West Mesa. And again, in 2021, another search based on a new tip. But frustratingly, those efforts only turned up ancient, pre-existing remains, nothing connected to this specific case.
So nothing new found. And this brings up a really tough part of the ongoing investigation, right? The development.
Yeah, authorities now believe that if there are further victims of the bone collector out there, their remains are likely buried irretrievably underneath the massive housing developments that were eventually built after the 2008 financial crisis passed. Construction restarted with a vengeance, and that landscape is utterly unrecognizable now compared to those satellite images from '03 to '05.
So recovery is basically impossible in those areas now.
Extremely difficult, if not impossible, adding another layer of just crushing despair for families who still have missing loved ones from that era.
This leads us to the distressing community perception that's kind of hung over this case from the start. There's been this deeper troubling sentiment reported that Albuquerqueans don't relate to the victims, maybe dismissing them, thinking, they were just a bunch of hookers and drug addicts.
It's awful, but it's a documented phenomenon.
And that dehumanization has a real impact on the search for justice, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Professor Dirk Gibson, an author who studied serial killers extensively, noted this profound lack of public outrage surrounding the West Mesa case, which is quite unusual for a crime of this magnitude. He said, and I'm quoting him, "There hasn't been a degree of public fear and alarm that you might expect. There's just no incentive for that."
No incentive.
Wow. That observation gives a disturbing explanation, at least partly, for why there wasn't sustained pressure on the police to investigate these murders with the same relentless vigor as cases involving victims from, say, more privileged backgrounds. It exposes a societal bias that can allow these kinds of atrocities to remain unsolved, unpunished.
And the voices of the families in all this, they're just utterly heartbreaking, echoing that systemic neglect they felt. Karen Jackson, Michelle Valdez's mother, expressed her devastation and raw anger. She said, "Somebody would do this to my daughter and dump her like she was a piece of trash and leave her lying out there with no dignity."
Just gut-wrenching.
She talked about how police rarely returned their calls, didn't seem to pursue tips the families themselves gathered. She summed it up starkly. "Nobody has listened to us for so many years."
And other families, still clinging to hope amidst all that pain, have asked for more searches too. In 2018, families of several other women missing from that same time frame publicly begged the APD to keep searching, believing their loved ones might still be out there, under the sand and soil of the West Mesa. This ongoing agony, this crushing lack of closure, it's a huge unaddressed part of this whole chilling case.
In a really poignant attempt to find some measure of peace, maybe some dignity for the victims, and to give people a place for reflection, a community park was opened in June 2020, right at the burial site.
Yeah, the 118th Street Memorial Park.
The mayor at the time said his purpose was not only to remember and celebrate those women who were murdered, but also for the daughters, sisters, mothers, cousins, friends, and neighbors they were. An acknowledgement that they were more than just high-risk individuals. They were cherished members of their community.
It's a truly powerful and necessary tribute, a physical place for remembrance, a commitment to never forget. Each woman's name is etched into this oval path that winds through the park.
I saw pictures. It looks very respectful.
Yeah, and across from each name, there's a bench and a tree, each one specifically chosen by their grieving families. A quiet place for reflection. The father of one victim put it so eloquently, just capturing the profound loss. He said, "These girls all had dreams. No girl grows up wanting that."
No, of course not.
Oh.
And Michelle Valdez's father, in his grief and frustration, voiced that desperate hope for answers, saying, "God, I wish we had some answers. We'll get our justice, maybe not here on Earth, but we'll get our justice."
Yeah,
It's just a testament to that enduring human need for accountability, even when it feels so far out of reach.
Yeah.
And so, 15 years on, the West Mesa bone collector remains unnamed, a chilling shadow over the New Mexico desert. The case, officially, is still unsolved. The questions just continue to hang heavy in that dry, still air.
This entire deep dive, really, from that shocking discovery to the decades of unresolved grief, it tells such a profound story. You look at the complex web of circumstantial evidence, the deeply disturbing reports of police corruption, the tragic way these victims were categorized as less dead, and the possibility of a perpetrator who either changed methods or isn't even active anymore. The West Mesa case forces us to ask, what does it truly tell us about the nature of justice? About the pervasive vulnerability of marginalized communities? About the hidden truths that exist right within our own neighborhoods?
Yeah.
It raises a crucial and really unsettling question. If the person responsible did change their pattern or maybe moved away, how many more similar cases involving equally vulnerable individuals might be out there right now, still undiscovered, still unacknowledged, just waiting to be found?
It's a chilling, haunting thought that really underlines the depth of this ongoing mystery. For our listeners, if you have any information at all about the West Mesa homicide investigation, any detail, no matter how small you think it might be, please contact the 118th Street Task Force. The number is 1-877-765-8273, or you can call 505-768-2450.
Crime Stoppers is also an option at 505-843-STOP, and information can be emailed directly to investigator Ida Lopez. Her email is ilopez@cabtq.gov. That's ILOPEZ@cabq.gov.
Any piece of information could be the one that finally breaks this case. This deep dive leaves us with so many unresolved questions, and perhaps a far deeper, more empathetic understanding of the silent struggles some communities face, and the justice they are still, after all this time, fighting so hard for.